Our movie kicks off with three individuals out in the mountains, digging and burying something that's literally on fire. After they finish, they take off and leave the place. But what that thing is and what they're actually doing, we don't really know just yet. Then we jump to the present day and find out that 10 years have passed since all that happened. We see the hero of our movie today, a guy named Paul, getting into a car with someone. As soon as he gets in, he asks the guy for the thing he requested, and the guy tells him it's right there in the glove compartment in front of him. We find out he wanted a pistol from him, and Paul actually takes it and loads it up with the ammo he has. The two of them start moving toward their destination, and on the way, the guy driving asks him, "Isn't it weird that you're coming back after 10 years? Paul just looks at him and says, "Tell me the truth. Where exactly did you come back from?" Paul stares at him and says, "I came from hell." The two of them arrive at a shop in the middle of the street, and Paul gets out of the car, heads toward the people in the shop, and finishes them off with his gun without saying a single word. Right after that, Paul gets back in the car and escapes the scene. The next day, we see Paul at an amusement park, and he just keeps riding all the rides there until it gets dark. Paul starts remembering all his memories from that place, and we find out that 10 years ago, he used to come to this park with his son. Among the memories haunting him is a house burning down, but we still don't know, my friend, what that house is or what the story behind it is. Paul leaves the park at the end of the day and lets the guy with him know he's busy because he's got a lot of stuff he needs to get done. Anyway, my friend, we see Paul at a guy named Ollie's house, and he has him tied up and bound to a chair while he's watching TV. A woman named Sherry shows up, and we find out she's his wife. She's obviously in total shock when she sees her husband tied up like that, but the real shock for her is when she sees Paul standing right there in front of her. At that moment, Paul asks her about a woman named Gemma and tells her it's best for them if they just tell him where she is. But the woman breaks down crying right then and can't control herself, telling him to just leave and leave them alone. Paul, without even thinking, gets up and stabs Ollie in the chest. Sherry loses it over her husband and runs to him to try and save him. But before she can even get to him, Paul stabs him a second time in the head and finishes him off. Sherry just keeps crying over what happened to her husband, so Paul tells her to confess right now so she doesn't end up like him. The woman starts talking and tells him that many years have passed since what happened, and she honestly doesn't know where Gemma is. Paul gets pissed off and gives her a sharp jab in her leg to make her talk, but she stays stubborn and won't admit anything to him. So the man finishes her off too. The next day, we see a guy named Jerry at his job, and a guy named Jim calls him to let him know that Ollie and Sherry were killed yesterday. Jerry is stunned by the news, and you can see the fear all over his face. Then he asks Jim if Norm knows the news yet, but Jim says he didn't tell him and asks Jerry to be the one to do it, then hangs up. We see Jerry at home after that, telling Norm everything that happened. We understand, my friend, that Jerry was living with them because he's married to Gemma, Norm's daughter. But the big twist here is that this is the Gemma Paul is looking for, and we find out that Sherry is her sister and Norm's daughter. Gemma is a total wreck in front of Norm and tells them they have to do something to get justice for her sister. But Norm is totally spaced out, staying quiet and showing zero reaction. In the meantime, Paul goes to a group of kids playing in the street and asks them about a boy named Adam. As soon as he finds him, he tells him to go tell Mark Bone that Paul is back. Adam goes home afterward, and Mark gets really anxious because of what his son told him. Mark thinks his son is lying because it's impossible for Paul to return, but his wife lets him know that Adam has never even seen Paul and doesn't even know his story. This makes Mark extremely terrified and worried, and he finally believes that Paul really is back. He runs to call Norm, scared to death, and tells him, "Help, Paul is back." But Norm lets him know that Ollie and Sherry were already killed. Mark then knows for sure that Paul is back and planning to finish them all off. He hangs up, grabs a knife from the kitchen, and goes to stand outside his front door. As soon as he sees Paul in front of him, he's completely shocked and keeps asking how he was able to come back. But Paul just looks at him and says, "Even I don't know how." He starts apologizing to him, "My friend," because we find out that Mark was one of the people who set the house on fire. Meanwhile, inside the house, we see Mark's wife, Edie, sitting there terrified, and she gets a call from her husband. But as soon as she answers, she finds Paul is the one talking, telling her to let Jerry, Gemma, Norm, and everyone with them know that Paul is back. Of course, Edie asks him about her husband, but he just hangs up on her, and she runs out to look for him outside the house. But she's shocked when she finds the police at the scene. And that's because Mark died from the knife he was holding. Now, my friend, let's go back 10 years to understand what actually happened to Paul. We find out that Paul was originally married to Gemma, and they had a boy named Aiden. But we noticed that Gemma treated Paul really badly, and that made her father Norm suspicious of him, asking if he cheated on her or met another woman. This was all because she couldn't stand him and treated him like garbage. But Paul just ignored it and noticed she was talking to Jerry in a nice way. A bit too nice, my friend. And Jerry is supposed to be one of the guys working with Norm, which really bothered Paul. After that, Jerry, Ollie, and Mark leave, and we find out they're dealing in illegal goods. Norm goes to negotiate with a butcher shop owner to smuggle his stuff inside the meat. When the guy refuses, Paul steps in and, without saying a single word, cuts off the guy's fingers and makes him sign the contract. Paul goes home after that and discovers that Gemma is cheating on him with Jerry. He's completely stuck and can't do anything because he knows what her father is capable of. Plus, my friend, Paul doesn't even love her. So he goes to his son, who is the only person he actually cares about, and sleeps next to him. But the next day, as soon as he wakes up, Paul finds out that Gemma is using illegal substances. Anyway, my friend, we go back to the present day and see Norm meeting with a corrupt officer. We find out this corrupt cop has been working with him for a while on their shady business, and he tells him he has to investigate these murders and what's going on with his gang. The officer then asks him, "Has Paul really come back?" But Norm tells him that Paul is never coming back, and whoever did this is someone else who knows about the past and is messing with them. After that, Norm goes with his gang to Paul's mother. Norm tells her that his daughter was killed along with her husband and one of his men. He asks her, "Has anyone contacted you in the last few days?" But the woman doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. Norm then orders his men to leave and sits down to talk to her. He suspects she brought someone in to get revenge for her son, so he decides to finish her off. Afterward, he and his men leave the place. At that same time, Paul arrives at the house, and as soon as he walks in, he finds his mother beaten and bleeding from everywhere, but she hasn't died yet. He runs to her, hugs her, and looks at the wounds on her body. She keeps reassuring him about himself and his son, telling him she's in a lot of pain. So Paul decides to help her die faster, and he's the one who chokes her. We then go back to what happened 10 years ago and learn that Norm went to meet Paul and told him that his daughter Gemma doesn't want to be with him anymore and wants a divorce to marry Jerry. He says whatever his daughter wants, he's going to make happen. Paul then lets him know he doesn't care about Gemma or even Jerry, and the only thing that matters to him is that the boy stays with him. Norm tells him it's impossible for him to leave his grandson with him. At that point, Paul tells him that his daughter is an addict, and it's impossible to leave his son with her. He makes Norm understand that Paul will prove this in court if he tries to take the boy, and then everyone will know his daughter is an addict. The next day, Paul gets his son ready for the city's annual festival. When they go, we find out it's the same amusement park where Paul spent the evening. The two of them keep playing together until Norm's men show up and tell him Norm wants to talk. They tell him to leave the boy with them and that the two of them will go on a specific ride to talk. They actually go, but Norm stays dead silent, so Paul realizes then that his intention was something else. This is when he sees Gemma and Jerry coming to take Aiden and run away with him. Paul knows then that he won't be able to do anything because Norm has a gun pointed at him. Paul keeps screaming to get off the ride, and as soon as he gets off, he finds Jerry right in front of him, and Norm hits him once on the head. After that, they throw him in the trunk of a car. Only one guy named Clay keeps apologizing for what he's doing and lets him know that he's forced to do it. Anyway, my friend, we jump back to the present day and see Clay with his kids, and suddenly he finds Paul right in front of him. But he doesn't finish him off this time. He greets him and asks him to get in the car. But Clay tells him his kids are with him. Paul threatens him and says, "If you don't get in with me right now, I'll blow up this house with your wife and kids in it." So Clay is forced to get in with him, along with the kids. Paul lets him know they are going to the amusement park now. Clay is once again terrified that Paul will do something to him. The man asks him, "Are you afraid I'm going to do something to your kids?" And Paul lets him know he hasn't decided yet. Clay breaks down and tells him they're just innocent kids, plus their mother will worry as soon as they're late. But Paul says, How is she going to worry when they're with their father? Paul then asks him about Gemma and Jerry's location. Clay lets him know he doesn't know anything about Gemma since Jerry left her. When Paul later asks about his son Aiden, he tells him that since Gemma disappeared, the boy also disappeared, and he knows nothing about him. He then asks about Jerry and says, "You definitely still see him," and Clay confirms that he's still in touch with him. Paul asks him to set up a meeting at the amusement park. They all go to the park, and Paul plays with the kids all day, but poor Clay stays terrified for them the whole time. At the end of the day, he lets him know that Jerry has arrived at the spot they agreed on. Paul asks if Jerry knows he's there, but Clay swears he didn't tell him anything. Paul thanks him for everything and tells him to take his kids and leave, then goes to meet Jerry. He greets him, but Jerry is terrified and asks about Clay. Paul tells him to focus on what's about to happen to him and forget about Clay. He threatens him with a knife, and Jerry moves with him. He takes him on a ride, booking it just for the two of them, and gives the operator a lot of money so he doesn't stop it until Paul says so. He talks with Jerry and asks about Gemma. Jerry says she left him a long time ago and he knows nothing. Paul doesn't buy it and asks again. Then Jerry confesses about a town Norm goes to often and says if he goes there, he might find her. He keeps apologizing and begging for his life, but Paul asks the operator to speed up the ride and cuts a deep wound in Jerry's leg. Jerry keeps screaming and bleeding, but Paul screams with him so no one notices because of the speed, until Paul finally tells the guy to stop. He escapes and leaves him in a pool of blood after he dies from the bleeding. Everyone gathers around, shocked. Anyway, Paul takes his car and drives fast until he reaches the town Jerry told him about. He looks for a place to hang out and watches everyone, looking for someone specific. Suddenly, he grabs a guy by the back of the neck and takes him into the bathroom, beating him up. The man is shocked because he doesn't know Paul or what he wants. Paul asks about the types of illegal substances he sells, and the man tells him all of them. Paul asks if he sells heroin, and the man says, "Who sells illegal stuff and can walk around with heroin today?" He says only the big dealers sell heroin because the town is small and it's not easy to bring it in. Paul asks how many people sell heroin here, and he says only 2. The man gives him the info to lead him to them, but Paul doesn't leave him. He takes him outside and makes him call one of them. As soon as he answers, he tells him there's someone who wants his goods, but the dealer is smart and asks why the guy doesn't just buy from him. The man says the guy specifically wants the dealer's goods and tells him where they are. But the dealer asks, does he actually have money? Paul asks the guy next to him, do you have money? Paul gives him a look, so the man knows he's going to get hit again, curses at the dealer, and says since he wants the goods, he obviously has money. After hanging up, he asks Paul if he can leave. Anyway, my friend, Paul didn't let him go, and we find out they're the ones going to the dealer. So he takes him in the car to the dealer named Dave. As soon as they arrive, Dave comes out to meet them. He's a fit guy who cares about his health and keeps talking to Paul about everything. The other man stands next to Paul, terrified. Anyway, Dave is in his own world and asks Paul about the secret to his fitness and his beard. He keeps babbling and says he drinks watercress juice to stay fit. As soon as he realizes Paul is staring at him without blinking, he gets scared and says, "Show me the money and I'll give you the goods." But Paul says, "I don't want the goods. I want some of that watercress juice." Dave reaches out to give it to him, but Paul stabs his knife into his hand. They're both terrified and screaming. Paul holds his hand until he cuts it off. After that, he bandages the wound so he doesn't bleed out. And we see a bit of the good side of Paul's heart, my friend. Anyway, he lets the man rest and tells the other guy to go get his money from his house. He tells him to take half and run, and the guy actually takes it and bails. Paul stays waiting for Dave to wake up and tells him to show him where Gemma's house is. The man says, "You could have just asked without cutting off my arm." He gets in the car until he brings him to Gemma's house, but Dave passes out. Paul enters Gemma's place and finds her asleep on the couch. He keeps screaming in her face. She wakes up and keeps screaming too. Anyway, my friend, we go back in time again to see the rest of what happened in the past. We see Norm's men taking Paul out of the car, tying him up, and putting him in his own car where he lived. They all go inside, and Norm kicks Jerry out and stays to talk with Paul. Paul asks how long they're going to be sitting there. Norm tells him they're staying until Gemma arrives because she's furious that he tried to take the boy from her. Norm then says Paul was one of his best people, but he doesn't know what brought him to this point. Paul says, "You don't know? It's been this way since I married your daughter." Gemma arrives and starts hitting Paul, and we notice, my friend, that she's not in her right mind. Norm says, "Do you think she can take care of my son?" and slaps him. We return to the present and Gemma is breaking down crying and terrified of Paul. She talks to Paul with total fear and asks what he wants. Paul orders her to call Norm and tell him that Paul is sleeping in the car in front of her house. Gemma calls her father and says everything Paul told her to, begging him to come save her. Paul orders her to hang up, but before she does, she lets him know he has only 25 minutes to get there. Sorry, dear viewer, I know I'm wearing you out, but the movie is just like this. Let's go back to the past again. We find out they were all sitting around thinking about what to do with Paul to stop him from taking the boy. We notice each of them hates him for a different reason. At that moment, Paul discovers that none of the people he lived among ever loved him. Suddenly, Gemma hits him in the head with a bottle. They all start pouring gas into the car he's in, and Ollie tries to make Paul drink gas and douses him in it so he'll catch fire quickly. After they make sure there's gas everywhere, they all get out and Clay throws a lighter into the car. They all stand watching it burn with Paul inside. Anyway, my friend, you get the events of the movie by now. Let's go back to the past one more time to find out how he got out. Anyway, we return to the present and see Norm after he arrives at his daughter's house with one of his men. He orders the man to take his rifle and finish Paul off while he's sleeping in the car. We find out then that Paul's plan worked and he killed Dave, who was already dead or unconscious in the car. Anyway, Norm takes his weapon and enters the house looking for his daughter. He raises his gun just in case Paul brought someone with him, but Paul is sitting on the floor waiting. As soon as Norm enters, Paul stabs him in the leg. A shot goes off from Norm's gun and hits Gemma while she's sitting on the floor. Paul stabs Norm in the leg again and goes to Gemma, finding she's still alive. Paul remembers the moment he was burning in the car and she was just standing there watching him. But suddenly, Aiden gets out of the car and Norm is shocked she brought the boy along, but she says she didn't have anywhere else to leave him. Gemma goes to put the boy back in the car, but Paul manages to get out of the car at that moment, screaming with his whole body on fire. Aiden is shocked by what he sees and keeps calling for his father. Clay asks them to shoot him because he's suffering, so 2 shots are fired from his rifle to finish him off. Aiden sees all of this happening right in front of his eyes. Anyway, we return to the present and see Paul banging Gemma's head against the wall to make her confess to his son's location. He reminds her of the boy screaming when he saw his father dying. When she refuses, Paul goes to her father, puts a pillow over his face, and tells her to confess or he'll finish her father off. Gemma is terrified for her father and tells him Aiden is under an abandoned bridge in the city. Paul is shocked and asks why his son is left under an abandoned bridge. Gemma says that since his death, the boy hated her and she couldn't deal with him. The older he got, the worse he treated her, so she decided to leave him there so he'd know the value of the life she provided. But he never came back and chose to live under the bridge instead. Later, she found out he became a drug addict on the streets. Paul is horrified and yells at her for letting his son become an addict like her. She breaks down crying and apologizing, begging him to leave her father. But he refuses until he finishes him off. Gemma keeps screaming over her dead father, but Paul gets up, takes her father's rifle, and shoots her in the head. The guy came to finish everyone in the movie. He leaves after that, and we see Paul at the abandoned bridge Gemma told him about. He keeps looking among the people there until he finds his son sleeping next to a pile of garbage. He wakes him up and tells him to come with him, but Aiden is out of it because of the drugs. Paul carries him to the car. Paul arrives at a church, carries his son inside, and Aiden wakes up asking where he is. Paul tells him he's safe. Aiden remembers his memories of fishing with his father and thinks he's dreaming. Aiden asks if he's happy. Paul tells him he's happy as long as he's okay, and if he isn't, he'll do whatever it takes to make him okay. Anyway, the next day, we see a nun in the church. As soon as she enters, she sees Aiden on the floor with Paul next to him. As soon as she runs to Aiden, she sees Paul's face and gets terrified. Paul's eyes have changed, and the nun is scared by what she sees. But Paul lets her know all he wants is for her to take care of his son. He leaves her a lot of money and tells her to stop him from using drugs. She agrees as long as he doesn't hurt her. Paul thanks her and leaves the place. We find out, my friend, that Paul actually died and the one who returned is his tormented soul. Paul returns to the same spot where he was buried. We learn they were covering Paul's body at the start of the movie. I was just as shocked as you, my friend. I had no idea the movie had myths and spirits in it. Anyway, our movie is finished for today. See you in the next recap. Anyway, my friend, if you like the movie, you have to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.